Hello. So I was just reading in Philippians chapter 3, and there's a lot of confusion about righteousness in the Christian church, and they tend to think that if you keep God's holy covenant, His 10 Commandments, that you're doing your own works, your own dirty works. I think the 10 Commandments is like your own righteousness, your own works of the law. When they've been confused, when they're talking about the law in a negative way, they're talking about the sacrificial law that was added for transgressions. So if I just read a couple verses here, it says, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, and this is Paul speaking in chapter 3, Philippians, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. So he's telling these people, I was circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law, a Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. But what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for the Messiah. Yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Yeshua, my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I may win Christ, and be found in him, not having mine own righteousness, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness which is of God by faith. So this is like a little confusing here to Christians. They don't understand this. So he's saying, so people can misinterpret this when they say, having mine own righteousness, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness which is of God by faith. I hope I can explain this well. It's just, okay, so the more I read it, the more I'm like, no wonder people are confused about this. I can hardly explain this. But anyway, okay, so he's saying he's not having his own righteousness, which is of the law, which is of the sacrificial law, but that which is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness which is of God by faith. Okay, so one could read this and say, oh, okay, so he's not having the righteousness of the law, but through faith. So he just believes, so that's his righteousness. But believing is obeying and keeping his 10 commandments. The righteousness of God is keeping his 10 commandments. So your faith is the keeping of the 10 commandments. So what is your faith? If you go to 1 John 5, 1-4, it says, whosoever believeth that Yeshua is the Messiah is born of God, and everyone that loveth him that begot, loveth him also that is begotten of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and we keep his commandments. Okay, so when he's saying, anyway, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. So part of your faith is keeping the 10 commandments. And if you go to Deuteronomy 6, the last verse in Deuteronomy 6, and it says, and it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before the Lord our God, as he hath commanded us. Okay, so he's saying concerning zeal, persecuting the church, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. That's not talking about the 10 commandments. That's talking about the sacrificial law, the law of sin is death that was added for transgressions. When they created the golden calf, God didn't destroy the people, for his name's sake. For the heathen round about would have said, you brought these people out of Egypt just to kill all of them. So for his name's sake, he didn't destroy the people. He added sacrificial law as punishment. So these Jews was going around, boasting in the righteousness of the sacrificial law. And Paul, when he came to Christ, had to give up the sacrificial law. So that's why he's saying, it was counted to count them but dung, the sacrificial law. Not having my own righteousness, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness which is of God by faith. That's the righteousness. That's keeping the 10 commandments. So he's saying, in being found in him, not having mine own righteousness of the sacrificial law, but that which is through the faith of Christ. Your faith is keeping the Ten Commandments. That's part of your faith. The righteousness which is of God by faith. Deuteronomy 6, and it shall be a righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before the Lord our God, as he has commanded us. 1 John 5:1. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. His commandments are not grievous. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world, and this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. So this is just butchered by the Christian church. You've been deceived. Your Messiah, they asked your Messiah, what's the sign of your coming into the world? He said, be not deceived, for the whole world will be deceived. So people read this verse and they go, oh, I don't follow the Ten Commandments anymore. I don't follow the righteousness of the law. I just believe in Jesus. Even though the Messiah's name is Yeshua, he told you, I came in my Father's name, they receive me not. Another will come in his own name, him you will receive. So they say, I don't follow the law. I don't keep the Ten Commandments. I just have faith. But they don't even know that faith means keeping the Ten Commandments. Your righteousness is keeping the Ten Commandments. Go read Deuteronomy 6, 1 John 5. 1 John 5, 1-4. Deuteronomy 6, verse 25. Philippians 3, 6-9. Yeah, guys, Christians, you got to keep the Ten Commandments. That's your righteousness. That's the righteousness of God, keeping his commandments. That's your faith. If you believe, then obey. Then keep his commandments. The Spirit of grace should have convicted you of that. You know, like, if we go back to Ephesians 2, I don't really want to get into this, but like, yeah, let's just end it here.